my last role as CTO Vice President at PepsiCo. My first year as a Vice President, everyone is like, congratulations, so happy for you. They're throwing things at you left and right, and all you're saying is yes, yes, yes. And my admin is like, what are you doing? Girl, what is you doing? I was like, oh no, I'm just like, I'm happy to be here as a VP. Like, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. She's like, you can't do all that. You gotta get your job done. Like, we cannot say yes to all these things. Set some boundaries, Fern, set some boundaries. Yes. Hey everybody, we are back for another edition of Two Lit Chicks. It's your girl, Fern Johnson. Alicia Mackay, she is still out on medical leave, but I have another phenomenal leader in tech and comms and PR and marketing, and that's Miss Cass Cooper. She is joining us. She is a research-driven writer, content creator, professional chaos whisperer, committed to transforming leadership and organizational culture. She has 20 years of experience in sales, org development, and leadership. Cass helped me firsthand how sustainable people-centered practices drive both profitability and long-term success. So I'm not going to go through a whole bio because she's going to do a little bit of an intro on herself. I had the wonderful opportunity to meet this phenomenal sister back in October of 2024. I think it was the very end of October of 2024. And I was doing my little thing called a TED Talk.
Which was amazing. Amazing.
Thank you, girl. I was getting all types of gray hair, which we cannot see. Thank you to, coloring product. But Cass was really phenomenal, and she was an inspiration on pumping me up and kind of getting me ready and sharing some feedback, and we made a connection there. And she has her own podcast, and we talked about content and kind of the conversation that we wanted to have and bring to the table. So, welcome, Miss Cass Cooper.
Hey, Fern, thank you so much for having me. I'm just really excited to be here with the Two Lit Chicks audience and just talk a little bit about just what's going on in the world these days. Like you said, my name is Cass Cooper, she, her. I am a chaos whisperer. So I take big ideas, things that are complicated, and maybe seem a little unapproachable, and I break them down so that people can make sense of them and then apply them to not just their individual leadership, but also their organizational development. And that's me in a nutshell.
Well, I appreciate you being that whisperer. What led you to really want to play in that space? What led you to want to be that whisperer?
I really kind of fell into it. I realized maybe around 2019, 2020, during that pandemic era, that there's a specific set of skills that has to come along with developing leaders. And so many of us were living through a time where it was hard to make sense of what was going on in the world around me. And I found myself on a call with my team and realized that some of the things that I thought were apparent were not apparent to everyone else. And so I just kind of started talking and asking questions, being available to answer questions as everyone else saw fit. And it really led me to pulling my degree in women's and gender studies, as well as my leadership experience, all together to make sense of patriarchy, white supremacy, organizational development, leadership development. And then that led me to getting my master's in inclusive leadership from the University of Oklahoma.
Okay.
And
you're a boomer sooner, honey.
And so I really led almost fell into taking what I already knew intellectually and academically and being more intentional about having those conversations, because the conversations are being had, but sometimes it's a less depth of a lens. And so I wanted to provide that lens for leaders that I lead and also people that are developing their own leadership style.
Awesome. Amazing. So today's conversation is really around something that we're all kind of going through because of our economic climate that we're in today. So today's episode is called What is Enough? Redefining Success During an Economic Anxiety. And right now, there's so much that's happened in a short, January 20th was less than 60 days ago. And so much has happened. DE&I has been taken off the table. Folks have been laid off. Folks are very uncertain with the changing workplace and the priorities that have changed for diversity and the equity in the workforce. So really, we're thinking about what is enough and what do I have to do to pivot to be effective, and there's a lot of fear out there. So today's conversation, we really kind of break it down into three things. One is this topic around redefining our success in this economic anxiety. What are the challenges that we see with that? What are the opportunities, and how can we make sure that as you leave this conversation, you've got some helpful tips, some impactful tips, and what's trending so that you can continue to mature in your career. Cass is phenomenal about this. She was all over this topic when we talked about it, given her DE&I background. And so I just wanted to open up the conversation around one of the challenges we have is just this endless growth treadmill that we're on and constantly trying to mature, trying to better ourselves, trying to move up the ladder. One of the things I talk about, Cass, with the people I mentor is you gotta love the laterals, and sometimes you have to move laterally, and that's okay. What's your perspective around this endless growth treadmill concept?
Yeah, I think, we're living in this post-pandemic world. We're living in a space where we really have to, a lot of people are just reevaluating what is important. And I think for me in my growth journey, I really wanted the big girl job with the big office and the big title. I had these aspirations to have a family that lived a certain way. And that whole idea of like, you can have it all. And that whole, just if I just keep going and keep growing and keep striving, then at that point I will be happy, right? If I check everything off of my checklist, then I will be fulfilled. And what I realized is once you kind of get all of those things, it's like, and then what? Right. And so it's like, okay, well, I checked all the boxes. I fulfilled my 10-year plan, my 5-year plan. I have the title. I have the house and the whatevers. And so now what do I do? And
Well,
it really,
the goalpost constantly moves.
it is. It's constantly moving, constantly changing. And I think one of the things that I realized it is that it doesn't change just based off of our own things. It changed based off of the culture, right? These ideas of who a woman is supposed to be, who a person of color is supposed to be, are always ebbing and flowing, which connects to this DEI conversation that we'll get a little bit more into later. But understanding that those things that are changing don't necessarily have to change the core values and the things that you find individually important. And so in order to start, you really have to hone in and dial in on what is my why? What is the reason why I go to work every day? Is it just for financial security? Totally valid. Absolutely. We all have to have capital in order to function. But could it also be, I want to make this world a better place. I want to be a there you are person instead of here I am person. That's one of my core values. Like, how can I see people and see people well and use that in my day-to-day interaction? So I think we're just in this pivotal cultural moment where we're changing how we work as well as what fulfillment looks like. And I just encourage people to take some time, whether it be 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes a week, whatever that looks like, to say, these are the things that I value and these are things that are most important to me. And then you can think about how you're going to get there. Because it might not be the big girl job with the big office and the title. It might be something completely different, and that's okay. Just understand that there's still going to be those external societal pressures that are also changing that goalpost.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we learned a lot during the pandemic. You had said something that triggered within the conversation, and that is, during the pandemic, we learned that we could live in a lot less and doing a lot less, right? And I think as we now post-pandemic, it's let's not go back to that surge of we needed everything and everything needed to be large and we kind of had to go for the masses. It's like, can we live on less and still be effectively happy? And also the piece that I learned too is what I thought was keeping me happy wasn't really keeping me happy. And I could be with myself. I could be living on less. I could aspiring for what was really core to me. And that was most important as opposed to going after this aspiration, going after this aspiration. I'm not saying don't have those aspirations. I think it's at pace, and let's pace ourselves and really understand. And that kind of gets me to being really self-aware of what you need to thrive on and to survive. What do you need to survive, that we need to thrive, and it takes some level of self-awareness in order for you to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, for me, it really was about realizing that I was really burnt out. I was traveling for work. I was doing all these things. I was speaking. I was, in a sales capacity. I was leading folks. I was volunteering, and having that time where I had to like dial back and do less career wise because I was working in an events industry at the time. There were no events. So I was at home and really trying to understand like that forced rest was something that really like was pivotal and changed the way that I saw work fitting into my life, because before I was fitting life into my
To
work.
work.
Yeah.
I think also what I'm hearing a lot, and I've actually talked to a couple of folks I'm mentoring last week, and they're really fearful. So there's a lot of fear-based decisions that are happening with this climate. One of the young folks I talked to, and he's actually probably 2 years into working professionally, and he said, "Hey, I'm really fearful. Am I being looked at as only a diversity hire? I came in with all these qualities, and so I need to make a different decision because now that DE&I is being taken out of the workplace, do I have to now look for a different job or get a different skill?" And I said, "No, you need to stand on your laurels of what you know and what you're bringing to the table, but let's be clear about what are your objectives and what are you being asked by the organization to deliver? Let's be clear on your accountabilities for the year and deliver against that. So you're not making a fear-based decision, but you're leaning into A, your faith, and two, the work that you have to deliver. That's going to prove your value to an organization." What are you hearing about this whole fear-based conversation within that's happening today?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to honor people's fear because it's very real.
That's true.
Like, it's not a thing that's being made up in our head. Let's not gaslight ourselves into thinking that the world is not very serious about the backlash against DEI and inclusive leadership in general, right? That is a very real thing. We are seeing it every single day. There's new information that's coming out all the time, right? And there's data and statistics to support that, underrepresented communities are being disproportionately impacted clearly, right? So let's just honor that. But I also am hearing a lot of like doubling down on tracking your own success metrics and tracking them against what your employer or your organization is doing, right? And so I think I know you probably tell your mentees this, like make sure you're writing down when you do something great, not just for your own acronym, right? And your own like ideas of, oh, I'm actually doing a good job at this. I'm actually great at this. But being able to quantify what your impact is and being able to brag on yourself is no longer something that is a good to have. That's actually a necessity, because you need to be able to go to your people and say every single week, this is what I did. This is what I accomplished. This is what I'm working on. This is the value that I'm bringing to the organization. This is the money I saved. This is the new idea that I came up with. And not being like sit back and let somebody tell you that you're doing that. It's such an important to be your own champion right now, and realizing that you bring so much value to the organization, but understand that not all of your value is steeped in the work that you do, right? I tell my mentees, your work has value, but your value is not in your work. And understanding that, especially for a targeted group, is going to be critically important, because that's a skill that you can take no matter where you are. I also would encourage people to don't be afraid to diversify your skill set and really look into where your skills might be transferable and see kind of where things are in the market. Don't get so comfortable in like holding on to the thing. It's like water. You hold on to it more and more. The more you close your hands, the less water you're going to be able to fill. So holding your hands open and being open to the possibilities, open to whatever may happen next, and being able to lean into that right now will give you a sense of hope because you'll be able to see like, oh, the world is vast. The world is big, right? I see organizations who are pulling back on equity and inclusion and diversity work, but I also see some organizations that are scooping up those great candidates and are like, okay, you don't want to work there? Come over here. We'll train you. We'll make you better. We'll do all the things and we'll invest in you. And there might be an opportunity, I don't know, to go international, right? Like think bigger outside of the United States. There's so many opportunities out there, but again, you got to have your hands open to the possibility rather than sitting in the, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose this job fear.
So that is an excellent segue. Just yesterday, no, I'm sorry, Saturday was International Women's Day, and
Yeah.
the wonderful opportunity to speak at the Anita Board Institute's Dallas Day for International Women's event that they had here in Dallas. And the conversation was around possibilities. And they asked me, Fern, how do, new next generation coming into tech, because it was really focused on the tech industry, talk about the possibilities. I said, well, first of all, if one person thinks there's not a ton of possibilities in tech, they're crazy. There's still going to be 3 million roles available between now and 2032 in tech here in the United States. So getting into tech is easy. Now, I would say getting into tech is easy, but there's a plethora of opportunity available and around for people to, if they want to be in tech, get in tech. But then we talked about technology adjacent roles and being flexible. So to your point about being open to taking roles where you can transfer your skills. I have a cousin, and he's in tech sales, and he's been out of work for about a year now. And I said, hey, let's look at technology adjacent roles. So while you're still interviewing to get that next tech sales software opportunity, let's also think about, could you do sales at Apple? Could you do sales at Verizon? Could you be selling mobile phones at Plant? That's in the technology adjacent space that keeps your skills sharp. So I too believe that we have to help folks understand that they can have transferable skills and stay ready. So it's if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And that goes to the whole piece of continual learning. And if you're taking all these different modalities we have to learn, then when the next opportunity comes, it may not be exactly what you're looking for, but you now have such diversity of skills and diversity of perspective that makes you a viable candidate.
And I think we as underrepresented groups have always been great at that of like, I can do a little bit of this, I can do a little bit of that, I can do a little bit of this, and I can put it all together. I'm going to be honest, I did not think that I was going to be a writer and content creator. When I came out of school, I thought I was going to be a professor. I thought I was going to teach and write books. I knew I wanted to be a writer, but what that would look like, I wasn't 100% sure. And so I think the first, 10, 15 years of my working life, I really leaned into, okay, I'm going to learn a little bit of here. This is going to pay my bills, but I also want to make sure I'm learning skills that I can do this so I can be a great writer. Here's things that I didn't expect to learn, like how to be a good leader, how to build across different departments, how to lean into when people want to say no, how to pull a yes out of them. Like, what does that look like? How do we make sure we're all these different things that make me a good content creator, a great content creator now were things that I didn't really know that I was learning along the way. And I would suggest anybody, especially people who are new to their career, being able to have a yes and attitude is going to be so pivotal right now. And again, these fears are very real and very, very valid, but we don't have to sit in that fear and that anxiety about what's going to happen next. Because the reality is, and this might be a hot take, so I'm just going to say it.
Go for it.
Blow me up in the comments. They blow me up in the comments. But the reality is the systems of power and privilege are doing what they're supposed to do because we've been doing so great when it comes to progress, right? White supremacy in and of itself is going to do what it needs to do to maintain itself. And that is hard to hear and hard to understand. But we as people who are committed to equity and inclusion really are doing the right work because there's this such harsh backlash. I do think that it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I think it is a testament to the work that people who have come before us, the work that we are doing, the work that the younger generation is doing. It's a testament to that the backlash is so hard. So we have to maintain a little semblance of hope because of how far we are going and how far we've come and not a lot of time, which is hard for a 20-something to hear because they don't remember a time where equity and inclusion wasn't a priority. But those of us who, you know,
Have a little age on us. Have a
little gray hairs. Mine don't hide as well as yours, but you know, like it is something that we have to. I was telling a friend the other day, you didn't grow up as a Black girl in the 90s and it shows. And I don't mean that as a shade. I mean that as like, it was not easy going to school and understanding and figuring out where my spot was in the world. And I think that is part of what gives me hope, because I see how far just my own career, my own inner circle has grown being Black women.
So, you know, I think we're in the same age realm, I'll put it, because I and finished college in the 90s and had to figure out my own way. But I will say that I had a lot of mentors and sponsors who really helped me. And I saw diversity really start from the beginning. Diversity, equity, inclusion in corporate America start from the beginning, and I saw it mature and really don't want to see it go backwards. So I know that there are a lot of changes that are being made, but I think we have to stay resilient, and we have to remember the forefathers and mothers that we stand on the shoulders on, and take all that they fed into us, take all that they fed into us and carry that forward. And I don't know that any one of us know the exact pathway, but I don't know if they knew the pathway back in the 90s and the early 2000s when they were blazing the trail to make it happen. I know that we don't want to lose ground. The landscape from a DEI perspective is changing, but that's where I feel like we have to get our mental toughness to continue to transition so that we are relevant, we are viable. And to me, that all goes with making sure that we stay sharp, making sure that we stay focused on the reality of where we are and where we want to go as a people. And so, while that wasn't the mainstay of today's conversation, but we would be remiss if we didn't address it, because the younger generation that we're trying to reach in this podcast and help them accelerate their path to greatness, they have to know whence they came from or who was before them, and then how do they take this journey forward. And so, yeah, I would say I'm fearful. I'm not fearful. I've got too much faith to be fearful, but I'm a little exhausted.
Right.
And I think that's an excellent segue into, how do we keep people from having this mental exhaustion? Because we have a long way to go. We have a long stride path to go. So any perspective around how to stay vigilant, how to stay resilient, how to deliver with grace, how to keep that fight going in you without getting sour, becoming militant, so that we drive towards that success we're looking for.
Now, Fern, this might be another hot take, but I think a little bit of militancy is okay sometimes. I'm just going to put that out there. Second, I would say my hot take is that, like, I really enjoy setting healthy boundaries, right? I think that, to your point of knowing that this work is being continuous and being in community with people who are doing DEI work, I think it's important for us as practitioners of equity to really be able to set healthy boundaries, right? I am very adamant about this is when I'm going to work on this specific thing and this specific project, but then this is when I'm going to go hang out with my friends or sit on my couch or work on a painting or do something that is like enriching just for me, and do it without shame, without guilt, saying, this is enough. I have done enough this week. I've done enough this day, and putting it down. I think also being able to healthily separate yourself from social media and the constantly on news cycle is super important, because again, this is a time where we are purposefully being inundated with all these changes, and it's almost impossible to keep up with. So just just know that it is changing, that your space is your space, and hold that sacred to yourself. And I think being in tune with your body is super important. Like, how did you move your body today? Like, are you like feeling anxious, or do you just need to drink some water? Like, what are we really doing? And being able to set up those healthy parameters for ourselves is super important, because it will help you be less jaded. And I think having conversations like this, like not isolating yourself, like sitting eyeball to eyeball and asking people, how are you coping with this? What is going on? Like, not necessarily what you think about it, but like, how are you not internalizing all of the drama that's going on in our world and keeping yourself safe and healthy? And if maybe you can come up and bring some ideas of things to do together, right? I think this is the time, this is why community is so important. And this is why leaning into people who are similar in experience, having multi-generational friendships, this is why those things are important to inclusion work, because you need those people to keep you going.
Yeah, you said something around boundaries and parameters, and I call it, I was talking to this group on Saturday, and they were like, hey, I have a hard time saying no. I said, you know what, you don't have to say no, you just have to protect your yeses. And why that's important is so that when you say yes, you're really giving to what you have to do. So you have to set some boundaries and parameters around how you use your time and where do you focus your energy. And so maybe it is not a no, maybe it's not now that you can get that done, but you're really protecting where you lean into. And I found that to be so amazingly important, especially the last 3 years. So in my last role as CTO Vice President at PepsiCo, my first year as a vice president, everyone is like, congratulations, so happy for you. They're throwing things at you left and right, and all you're saying is yes, yes, yes. And my admin is like, what are you doing? Girl, what is you doing? I was like, I don't know, I'm just like, I'm happy to be here as a VP. Like, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. She's like, you can't do all that. You got to get your job done. Like, we cannot say yes to all these things. Set some boundaries, Fern. Set some boundaries.
Yes.
And I think so what you're saying is spot on. But I also feel like what you're saying around understanding what you need to refuel yourself is important. And that if it's, everyone knows I'm a Pelotoner. I love my Peloton. And I've been going through knee issues like forever and a day. I'm on that Peloton every daggone day I can get on that because it fuels me. And if it's 15 minutes or if it's 5 minutes or if it's an hour or half an hour, that's what I need in order to make sure that I'm staying moving, because to me, movement is medicine, that I'm staying active. So I think those boundaries are super important. I think self-care is super important. And then I still think that learning is super important. And the reason why I constantly throw this learning piece in there, it's a part of my 3L principle: learn, leap, and leverage. But I think there's different ways you can learn. You can learn from your friends who maybe have a different career, who might be a CPA or might be a psychologist or might be an event planner, right? And they can learn from technologists like myself who, hey, what's the latest technology you're getting engaged in? They can learn from concept providers like yourself. So I just feel like that self-care is important. Protecting your yes is important. Constantly learning and redefining what's enough, being back to our title for today, is important. And having new metrics, like new success metrics of, maybe success is being redefined in this climate. And maybe if I'm really clear with what do I really need to survive and thrive might be different from what I thought 10 years ago. And if you're new, just developing your career, I would just say, what makes you happy? How do you lean into that? What makes you happy professionally and personally? So that you can kind of merge those two together and not be, this is what I do in this space, this is what I do in that space. But the more that you can blend together, I think you have more happiness.
And I think this is why I talk so much about having a work-life rhythm rather than a work-life balance, because I have found so much value in being able to find a job that balances with my life and creating a life that balances with my job. Like, I enjoy, I mean, some people would call it I'm a professional yapper, but I really do enjoy being able to take big ideas and break them down and explain them and give a name to things. And that people know when they live in community with me that that's a part of who I am. And we're going to have these deeper, bigger conversations. We're going to have fun while we do it, but we're going to be, okay, what is the why behind that? How are you getting fuel for that? Like, is that due to what you actually intrinsically want to do? Or is that something that you feel you have to do because of your intersectional identity? Like, having those conversations is important to me. And so being able to have a role that complements that is is such a needle in a haystack, but you got to keep searching for it. And I really love what you said about having self-care and redefining what that is. And I wanted to make sure I said the enough part, you are already enough. You are already enough. No
You
amount
are
of
enough.
success
Yeah.
is going to change that. And so if you start from a place of I am enough, then everything else complements.
Mhm.
Saying the boundaries complements, right? I am enough, even if I don't take on this project. I am enough if I take on the project. Being able to say that with your whole chest is such a critically important part of just development and being a full adult.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, what I do with this podcast is we're giving it back and we're paying it forward. And I really believe that you shedding your light around being enough and redefining success, taking care of yourself, setting boundaries are all things that this next generation needs to hear. Today's generation needs to hear. We all need to hear. And when we lay out this podcast, I want to make sure that people always walk away with a couple of tidbits of value, right? And you said you're a professional yapper. I might be borrowing that girl.
Please do, please do. I try to keep it cool. That's what the young kids,
I was like, okay, my team, professional yapper, we're putting that on the
Yeah.
lid. So as two professional yappers, let's leave people with a couple of things that are helpful, impactful, and then some tips. And we got a lot on the tip jar.
Yes.
So I think the first thing you said that I thought was helpful is work has value, but your work is not your value. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Oh yeah. So some people use the term booked and busy. I like to use the term peaceful and paid. You should be paid your value. Your work is so valuable. The things that you do, the education that you've received, the hard work and the certifications and all that stuff, that has a dollar amount attached to it, not just for your investment, but for what you're going to get the return on your investment. So get paid for what you are doing, but understanding that the amount you are paid is not your value. Again, you are enough. You are enough in and of yourself without the certifications, without the degrees.
Right.
A lot of people of color, specifically Black women, were like, oh, I'm bored, I'm gonna go get my PhD. Why? Like, what? You don't have to do that. But I think we find value in education. But understanding that, like, once you get that, like, whatever that certification or that other degree is, like, you need to be paid for that and have peace around it, right? Your work has value and that you need to be compensated fairly for that. That's the equity piece of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But that your work does not define all the value that you bring to the world.
All right, so that's our helpful tip. So our impactful tip is stay ready versus getting ready. Being really self-aware of what you need and why you need it. I talk about continual learning, different modalities. Do you have anything to add on the impactful side of the conversation?
Yeah, I think, I double click, retweet all the things about, well, maybe not retweet in this, but you know what I'm saying. On the continual learning, right? Being able to learn new things. But I also think understanding the historical context and like understanding history is so important. We touched on that a little bit earlier. I don't know if there's anything I would add. I just feel like you just gotta keep learning.
We don't have to embellish. Okay. So tips. So guys, we're doing a new format for Two Lit Chicks podcast season 2. We talked about I know I learned that. These young mentees got me going, girl. Got me going with all these new things.
That's why we need them.
We need them. Cool. Reverse mentoring is important. Okay. So we have some tips, you guys. One is enough. Build your network and make sure they align with your values. Work-life rhythm. Peaceful and paid. I am enough. You are enough. I am enough. You are enough. Let's say it together. You are enough. All right, folks. I want to thank you so much, Miss Cass Cooper, yapper extraordinaire, professional yapper. We're gonna be borrowing that. I'm gonna be I'm gonna be yap. That's what you don't know about. Once I get a term, it's like, but I'm gonna do it with this, right? Gotta get that in there.
Yep. Bro, yep.
So excellent topic. We want to thank you so much for joining us on behalf of myself, Fern Johnson, and my girl Alicia Makaye, who's not here with us, but we'll be back soon. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. You can continue to follow Miss Cass Cooper at @just_Cass 2.0 on all the socials. You can follow this podcast at 2 Lit Chicks Podcast, and we will see you on the other side. Thanks, girl.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Fern.
All right. Bye-bye.